Okay, so on today's video, I'm going to do something a little bit different. This is based on my 3 or 4 years now in the investment banking industry, but more importantly, it's based on the 20 plus years of experience that my advisors, my CFO, my COO have in the banking industry, working for major institutions like HSBC, JP Morgan, BTG Pactual, Deutsche Bank, and RBC, just to name a few. Today, I'm going to walk you through what a transaction at a major investment bank looks like end to end, and this is exactly the process that we follow internally now in order to get these transactions done. Now, a lot of guys online know more or less how investment banking works, but 99% of them don't actually know what goes into a transaction from end to end in this kind of manner. This is by far going to be the most exclusive look at what A to Z looks like in these transactions. Most people believe that investment banking is about hopping on phones, closing deals, or sitting behind a spreadsheet and pounding out numbers. Now, both of these things are true, but very few people, again, understand what this actually looks like in practice from A to Z, and that's exactly what I'm going to be breaking down for you guys in this video today. Now, this same methodology holds true whether you're an early stage company entering an M&A transaction, a growth stage company looking for a restructuring, or a business at the growth stage that is simply looking to raise capital. Here's the crazy part, is that once you understand the methodology, you will see exactly why some people are closing deals in weeks or very few months versus people taking a long time, years even, in order to get a transaction done. Most importantly, this will give you the blueprint for how you can position yourself in the middle of these deals in order to make millions of dollars once you are a licensed broker. So over the next few minutes, I'm going to walk you through every single step from the first time that you onboard a client all the way until the point where the wire hits their account and even past that. And trust me when I say that by the end of this video, you will understand the real life implementation of investment banking, not just something that's written in a textbook, but something that's based on 20 plus years of experience from myself and my team. If you don't know me already, my name is Alex. I started a capital advisory firm at 22, and subsequently the team and I at Savvy Capital have raised over $400 million. And on this channel, I help agency owners, business brokers, M&A brokers, and debt brokers learn how to go up market and start their own capital advisory firm in as little as 30 days and make as much as $100,000 plus per month with millions of dollars in success fees available to them upon closing. Before we dive in, this is not legal advice. I'm not a lawyer. You should not conduct investment banking transactions without being properly licensed to do so, and all of the other usual disclaimers that should be at this part of the video. Now, with all of that said, let's hop right into it. Okay, so let's go over high level what happens in these transactions from A to Z. The first step of any of these transactions is deal origination. This is the part of the transaction where you go out and you court a client in order for them to onboard with your firm. This can be done in a number of ways. I've kind of laid out for you guys in a lot of my videos, one of which I'll put right here, how you guys can go out to market and actually originate your own deals through, let's say, cold email. Now, the other thing that we do internally all the time is direct dial or go through GPT, get GPT to give us a short list, and then go to market based on that short list as well, if we have a mandate in mind when we're going to market. This means that we've already spoken to a lender or an equity provider who have specific mandates, and then we go to the market in order to originate the deal for them. This same thing is true of when we have a thesis about what's hot right now, what we believe that debt and equity allocators will be looking for. Once we have that general thesis, we will then pull a short list and go out to the allocator side of the transaction directly. So yes, in a lot of my videos, we are speaking about how you can do origination through cold email, but there are a number of different ways that you can do this. You can reach out directly on LinkedIn. You can literally pick up the phone and start dialing. These are the bases of more traditional investment banking, is reaching a person directly. And although what I say on this channel a lot is that you should be using cold email, because it's true, it helps a lot to get that top of funnel attraction. And we've met a lot of debt and equity providers through this methodology, having these first meetings when we have deals, and we originate the vast majority of our deals this way. The old way, the traditional way of investment banking, is still very, very valid. And for all intents and purposes of this video, I'm going to break down for you not only what I would do, but also what is traditionally done in order to originate, and as well as every single other step of the transaction. Now, the last part of origination, more generally in traditional finance, takes place when they actually take out and court a client for them to come on. So you have to think at the highest levels of this occupation. Well, what these guys are doing is they're working at major firms like JP Morgan or RBC or you name it. And they have a long contact list of people that have maybe already been through an investment banking process with them. Maybe they have a wealth management account with that firm, or maybe it is just publicly available information that these people are looking to conduct a specific transaction. And so what investment bankers will do is reach out directly from a, at jpmorgan.com email and start to court that client, start to build the rapport, take them out for lunch, take them out for multiple lunches, and hopefully they will land that client. Now, the problem with this, and the reason that we teach the thesis that we do, is that originating deals in this manner is oftentimes very, very competitive. So as an example, Mo Ellis helped Oracle with a very, very large transaction. And in order to do this, they had to court them over a very long time. They got a lot of money in fees. But this was a process that was very, very competitive. They would have had 5 or 6 other major global institutions attempting to court Oracle at the same time. And so although we do recommend, hey, at the higher levels, when you start to really play this game, you will be elbow to elbow with the largest players in the space. Our job is to figure out theses where you are elbow to elbow with 3 or 4 or 5 of these behemoths. Okay, maybe even better, you're shoulder to shoulder with one behemoth who's actually just a very large boutique who focuses in that specific area. And these days, those are most of the transactions that we try to do, and most of the origination that we try and do is very, very niche specific, sector specific, so that we limit the amount of competition that we're seeing in the banking world as slim as possible. Once somebody agrees, okay, once you have a party that is interested in engaging with you, you get over an engagement letter or a contract. You actually formally engage the client in the transaction in order to take those next steps. And so usually we'll send them over an engagement letter through our broker. Bigger houses, the broker and the investment bank is integrated, so they'll just send them over an engagement letter. That will usually get checked over by compliance and some of the senior people at the firm in order to ensure that everything is correct. You guys will come up with the terms of that transaction, which you guys probably talked about during the origination process, and now you're getting that out paper to the client. And this is kind of the start of their real engagement with you. Now, step 3 of this transaction is preparation. You're going to start to put together a SIM, you're going to start to put together financial models, you're going to start to put together the marketing materials. All of this stuff is what happens during the preparation portion of the transaction. Now, for a long time at the firm, we didn't really do this. We didn't think to do this, we didn't know to do this, because we didn't have the experience of guys that have been in the industry for 20 plus years telling us, hey, this is how this process works formally. Once I brought those people in, and that's why we suggest to Capital Advisory that you find these people and bring them in as soon as possible, is because they will guide your process very, very nicely. That preparation is key, because if you and your bankers don't understand the deal correctly, it is going to be near impossible for you to actually transact on it. Step 4 is the marketing / the outreach. Okay, so this is where you actually go out to market and you start to talk to the allocators, the buy side of the transaction, if you will, and get an idea for who's interested, what kind of terms they might be interested at, and whether or not they'd be a good fit for the transaction itself. So this is obviously the crucial part. This is where you go to market and you find the potential investors or the debt providers or what have you. And like I've said in a number of these videos, once again, I'll put this video here that kind of shows how I conduct outreach end to end in these transactions. But effectively, the marketing outreach portion can happen in a number of ways. Once again, you can go out to market at scale through cold email. You can use LinkedIn automation, which we use on clients' accounts all the time, or you can go out directly by phone, create a short list, and go out to those potentially interested parties. I will be honest, going out by phone has yielded us term sheets in the past that have been countersigned by our clients. It is probably the best way to go about it is sniper approach. However, when you go shotgun approach with the cold outbound, you will get a ton of first meetings for the client. Now, if you're a licensed broker, the best thing you can do is take these initial meetings and then boil them down. For that same client that I talked about where we use the sniper approach, we also use the shotgun approach to get 2 or 3 other term sheets at the same time. And that was from that more shotgun approach. Definitely Definitely still effective if your client has a good deal, but a good way to start and get a feel for what the market is looking at is figure out who are the top 30 contacts that would be interested in this deal. Go directly to them and get a feel for what they like. I have allocators that I've spoken to, a year after previously having spoken to them from a shotgun approach campaign. I'll go into GPT, who are the people? Great, I already have contact with this person, and this person, and I will just pick up the phone and phone them directly. I phoned a managing partner the other day for a debt transaction at one of the largest debt funds in the world, and he was a managing partner. I just was able to pick up the phone because I had already reached out to him in the past, and that is why the shotgun approach mixed with the sniper approach is the most effective way to get these transactions done, because you will make the connections, and even if they don't like the deal that you initially sent them, you now have those people in your Rolodex for life. And that's why it's very important to set up a robust CRM as well, so that you can later go back, see who you've spoken to in the past, once you have a defined shortlist, and you can go out to those people directly. Now, once you've gone out at scale, you've had a number of conversations, I would say somewhere in the ballpark of 20 to 30 conversations minimum, and a larger mandate. I've had clients where we have 100 meetings or 150 meetings in order to figure out who the best parties are for the specific transaction. Once you've boiled that down and you get to later stages in the conversation, so usually you'll have like a first meeting, then you'll shift them to a second meeting, and in between they'll do some high level due diligence. They'll come back to you in that second meeting, start asking questions that they specifically want to see from the client. You get them back answers to those questions, and that can take 3-4 additional meetings. And then you're finally at a stage where they say, okay, let's get formal terms across. And so once you have formal terms from a few different firms, that's really the name of the game, is you get 3 or 4 different sets of terms, and then you start kind of pitting them against each other to the best of your ability. So, once you have standard terms from these different parties, then you can go back to the parties that you spoke with and say, hey, I got these terms from Timmy. Can you come down a little bit on your price of capital here? And so that's what this process is all about, is having those initial meetings where you're just getting those term sheets, okay? That leads you into that next step, step 6, which is management meetings and due diligence, where you now have high-level terms. They're going to meet with management, and you guys are going to try and pinpoint down some more concrete terms, and then you'll move into kind of final bids and LOIs. This is the part where once you've had those management meetings, that due diligence, you've gotten those initial terms, you're going out, you're pitting these different terms against each other, and then you're going to receive final term sheets from everybody, okay? Once they've been shopped around, pitted against each other, and you've gotten people to get better on whether it's the rate or they're offering the company a higher valuation, that's the portion of this where that takes place. Step 8 is going to be the definitive agreement. This is going to be where you finally get one agreement, where this is just like when you originated the deal. After you originated it, you sent out an engagement letter, same thing. This is getting the terms down on paper and finally having something very, very concrete. Client signs, counterparty signs in terms of the allocator, and at this point the allocator might do some final due diligence, deep diving into the books and taking a little bit of even closer look once everything has been signed and agreed upon. And then you reach that final stage of closing, where you get regulatory approvals, financing is arranged, and the wire transfer is executed to the client's account. And so those are kind of the steps end to end of this transaction, and I'm going to break those down even further in this next portion. So we're about to go into an example of the M&A buy and sell side, step by step, like even more in depth than what we just went through. What I wanted to take a minute and remind you of is that if this is of interest to you, if you want to figure out more about how to not only conduct these transactions A to Z, but actually get involved in them and stand in the middle of the flow of millions, hundreds of millions, and even billions of dollars during these transactions, I would recommend that you take a look at Capital Advisory. That is where I bring members of my team that have worked at these major institutions like JP Morgan, RBC, BTG Pactual. I bring them into the fold, and they actually help you side by side not only learn how to do these transactions, but also consult on how we do these transactions internally, because they're a part of these transactions internally as well. And so you really have help, not just from myself, who stumbled into this from marketing, became quite proficient at it over a number of years, but from people that have really been in the field for 20 plus years. And those people are also in the fold, working these transactions, helping you and consulting you step by step throughout this process. What I wanted to stop and say is that if you guys are interested in this video and you guys want to learn how to make as much as 8 or even 9 figures a year by creating your own capital advisory firm, much like I'm on the path to doing at Savvy Capital, what I would recommend that you do is go ahead and watch this video where I break down how exactly we set these firms up, what's involved, who's involved, and what success people have seen in the past as well. Okay, so you'll see that this sheet here is actually broken down into a number of different sections. Okay, so you have mandate and kickoff, due diligence and marketing material preparation, marketing and buyer outreach, indications of interests, due diligence, binding offers, final bids, exclusivity and signing, financial work stream, and closing and post-transaction. Okay, and then you'll also see that each of these is broken down individually into the various steps, as well as the documentation that is required at each of the steps of this portion of the transaction. And so what I'm going to do is walk you through this. Now, I must give you the disclaimer that this was actually put together by my VP, Lucas Cruz. He worked at RBC, he worked at BTG Pactual, the largest investment bank in Brazil, and he worked at JP Morgan. Okay, so this is based on his years of experience, and it also has been curtailed to be in line with what we do internally at Zastri & Co. and Savvy Capital. Okay, so let me walk you through this step by step and give you a little bit more insight into how exactly this is going to work in practice. So number one, you have the mandate and kickoff, right? It's going to start with engagement letter execution. So the client engaging with you and putting together the fee schedule. Then you go through preliminary valuation and benchmarking. Output, you're looking at comparables and you're putting together a brief valuation memo. Now, this stuff is annoying, I'll be honest with you. Like I said, we didn't used to do a lot of this stuff, and when we started doing it, it pissed me off because it takes a lot of time, but it prepares you for the actual transaction itself, and you cannot underestimate how much these portions of things are going to prepare you for the transaction itself, the insights it's going to give you, the ability to speak to the transaction that it's going to give you when you're speaking to potential allocators. You'll sign an NDA, so you'll have the buyer NDA template and you shoot that out. And you'll have kickoff meeting with the client where you set expectations, you go over some initial things, and you ask for kind of a preliminary list of things that you're going to need from them. So like it says here, kickoff agenda, process timelines, roles and responsibilities memo, and then initial information request list to the company, which is what I just said. And so that's the IRL tracker. So you need that information request list so that they get you over kind of the initial things that you're going to need. From what I've seen, people will do this at various stages. I've worked with other advisors who will ask for kind of this information request sheet before they do anything, before they engage you, before they sign a letter, before anything gets done. Okay, depending on the level of underwriting and due diligence that you can do just based off of initial calls, this is going to look a little bit different and it might be at a different step of the process. From here, you're going to be jumping into due diligence and marketing material preparation. So management meetings and deep dives, these are hour-long meetings, literally hours. Sometimes these go 2-3 hours where you're sitting down with the client on Zoom or in person, and you're just going back and forth with going through all of the information that you need to make sure that you can wrap your head around the transaction. Again, super undervalued by most capital advisory firms, which are just like boutique shops that these guys are running. When you are playing at the highest level, you need to make sure that your understanding is extremely high level of the transaction that you're going to be doing and very thorough, because when you're going to market, you are representing the client as you're brokering this transaction. So you want to make sure that you have all the information necessary and packaged in order to be able to do so. Then you'll get a VDR set up and populated with data from the information request list. A VDR is a virtual data room. So you're going to set up an initial data room in order to be able to fulfill and have all of that information request list put into by the client. And that's where their initial information is going to go. Now from here, you're going to start drafting the SIM. This is the confidential information memorandum, and it's basically just a shorter document that goes over the high level on the deal and a little bit of the intricacies of the deal. I would say like intricacies so far as they can be presented at a high level. So you might go over the most important highlights during the SIM that somebody would need to know in order to be able to kind of make an educated initial decision on whether this is something of interest. From there, you start to build out the financial model. So this is a huge Excel model, a sensitivity table, assumption sheet. So the assumption sheet obviously goes over, what market assumptions are being made, competition assumptions are being made, client assumptions are being made. You're going over what are the assumptions that are being used in order to create this financial model, so that when somebody looks at it, when an allocator looks at it, they can say, here's the numbers, here's the financial model, and here's how they got there. Sensitivity tables are basically just giving you like the plus or minus on what's going on, and worst case scenario, best case scenario, that kind of stuff. Then you're going to prepare a teaser document, which is again just a 1-pager, 2-pager that's usually anonymized. So when you're working with larger transactions, so we have like a $40 billion publicly traded fund that we're looking to engage right now, and everything we've done with them, even like going out and trying to gain initial interest, has all been anonymized. Okay, we actually brought another advisor in that has significant experience in this specific type of transaction, and even to them, we had to keep all of the information and anonymized for a long period of time. So you want to make sure that this teaser, very high level, no names basis, so that you can just flick it out to people as necessary, just to gauge initial levels of interest. Then there's a preliminary buyer list development. So you'll go into GPT, create a short list. That's what we do internally. We'll figure out, who are kind of the top targets for this. We'll also go through our CRM, see who's done these initial transactions. We'll use databases we have to see who's done these transactions in the past. And then usually you're going to get somewhere in the ballpark of like 30 to 100 top investors that exist in the investor world for this specific transaction. Then you do go-to-market strategy alignment. So we've got all the materials, we've aligned with the client, we kind of know what next steps are going to be. And so now the focus is, okay, here we're going to go to market, and let's get together and discuss what this is going to look like. Okay. Then we have the marketing and buyer outreach. So this is when kind of the rubber hits the road in terms of actually going to market. So launch a process with the teaser and the NDA. So you'll put together email templates. You have an NDA tracker in place, which is usually just like a sheet. Who has this gone out to? And then you'll use that sheet to also see what steps of the transaction people are at. Some guys use sheets. A lot of investment banks or boutiques will use, Pipedrive or HubSpot or CRMs in order to be able to carry out this portion of things, tracking where people are at in the process. Then distribution of the SIM to interested parties. So again, this says email templates, NDA tracker, and this is a more traditional process. So what I would kind of include here as well is actually going to market. So we would then go out to market on an anonymized basis, gauging initial interest, and go out at scale to the top 1,000 funds that would be interested in something like this, and 4 or 5 parties at each of these, or 10 parties that would be decision makers at each of these, so that we can get initial top of funnel interest as well, in addition to doing that more traditional model. Once we've done that, we would start to have distribution of the SIM to interested parties, so they can get a little bit more of a deeper breadth of the situation than they would get from just the teaser. And then coordination of buyer Q&A. So you want to keep track of what these buyers are asking, or investors are asking about the specific transaction, so that again, you can either populate the VDR with that information, or you can answer questions really, really quickly because you have them all listed, and guys are oftentimes going to end up asking the same exact questions. You'll see that when you work a transaction long enough and you've spoken to 50, 100, 150 parties on that transaction. They are asking a lot of the same questions. So if you can categorize those questions and have them written down, you're going to be in a lot better of a place. Then management presentation prep. So you've sent out the information, you've gone out to market at scale, you start to get some initial interest, you've sent them over kind of a little bit more in depth on the SIM. Now it's time to do management presentation prep and the dry run. So we will sit down with the client, go back and forth on what exactly this transaction looks like, how they should present it, what are the key things that they should be hitting in these presentations, where they should be bringing up the deck, if they're bringing up the deck, how long these meetings should be, the questions that they're likely to get based on the initial conversations that we've had with potential allocators, all of this kind of stuff, right? You want to prep them. Again, we're talking about hours and hours of meetings with the client in order to get them exactly where they need to be for us to have really good conversations. Then conduct management presentations. So you've had initial calls as the broker or the advisor on the transaction. You've spoken with a number of different parties. Like I said, could be 50, 100, 150, and you kind of boiled that down to, let's say, the top 20 guys where they've made it past the first steps. Now they need to speak to management. And in a more traditional process, that number would be even slimmer. It would be like 5 parties that are most likely to take this thing to the next level. And so then you conduct those management presentations. Management gives a presentation to prospective allocator, I'll be honest with you, with a lot of our transactions at least, usually it's not like a full presentation. It's more so like the management coming in there, giving like high level on the business and giving nuance to the conversation that as brokers we might not have, telling their story more so than the actual story of the business, the meat and potatoes, the numbers of the business. Then we have the data room Q&A management. So you're putting into the data room that Q&A log, you're putting in a weekly summary of the different questions that have been asked and putting it into a Q&A section in the VDR, so that constantly you're being able to answer these questions before the potential allocators even come to you with the questions. Now, you've worked through these steps, everybody's met management, people are starting to be interested. So you receive and evaluate the initial LOIs. So you're getting initial letters of intent. You create like a little grid with all of the different LOIs that you're getting, and then you can hyperlink it to the actual LOI itself. If you're in a CRM, then you can have that in your actual pipeline, taking a look at the client or at the potential allocator, and it'll have their term sheet in there, right? You're getting initial letters of interest. Then you shortlist these buyers for the next round, okay? So you're getting them ready for the next round of conversations. You kind of evaluate them on a metric. You evaluate them on a matrix. You send out an internal memo to let everybody know, hey, these are where these various parties are at. And then you have recurring process updates with the client where you're just updating them on what's going on. Then we hop into due diligence, kind of phase 2. So now you'll have deeper buyer due diligence. Once you sign these LOIs with these clients, then they'll want to do deeper due diligence. They'll have an expanded information request list, document access log. They're going to want to see everything. They're going to want to see the ins and outs of this business. They're going to want to talk to people in this business. They're going to want to talk to vendors of this business. They're going to want to talk to buyers of the business and clients of the business. This is a really deep dive, and they're going to figure out everything about the business possible. Okay. Then there's going to be additional management sessions or site visits. They'll meet in person. They'll have discussions about the business. And again, now management is really involved in the process here because you're getting closer to closing. Okay. Then facilitate third-party due diligence. So you might have like a third-party contact sheet in your VDR and giving people a third party to speak to regarding the due diligence. Sometimes people bring in like a whole third party to run a process or evaluation on the business, and then refine financial analysis based on the feedback that people are giving you. So you might update the models and get feedback summary notes from the potential allocators. We're at the final steps here. We're trying to close this thing out. So you're going to distribute bid instructions. So you're basically letting people know, hey, if you want to get your bid in, this is the period of time that you have to do it. This is what it has to look like. Okay. And then you are distributing a draft SPA. So kind of a seller favorable draft SPA and a markup template. So you're allowing them to get kind of an initial offer in and showing them how we want to see these offers. Then you'll receive final bids from everybody. Again, we're making a kind of a bid summary matrix, and then we evaluate them. We summarize the evaluation that we've done. We go to, there's a board deck and recommendation memo from the buy side, and then we select our preferred bidder. Do a bidder selection memo and an LOI chart so that you lay it all out and you make a selection based on all of that information that's been laid out and that you've been kind of putting together throughout that period of time. Now, exclusivity and siding, you negotiate the final SPA and the related documents. You can coordinate confirmatory diligence. So again, they're going to want to do another round of diligence in order to confirm that everything is exactly as kind of people say that it is, and secure internal and external approval. So everybody on their end, everybody on your end, you're getting approvals for this to go down. Like you're having to unlock a bunch of things in order for this to go through, basically. Lastly, there's board presentation and approval, and then you execute on the definitive agreements, okay? And that's when things really get going. Now, you introduce the buyers to the lender. So if you have like a lender involved in the transaction in order for the buyer to be able to buy this business, then that is when you would introduce them. You'd coordinate with the lenders on the due diligence and the materials, and then you build and maintain a debt capacity model for that business. So how much money can the business take on? How far can you lever the business for the firm that's allocating the capital into it, as well as the lender that they've used in order to do so? What does that look like on an ongoing basis, so that as the business is running, as the business is cash flowing, as the business is conducting day-to-day business, you know exactly where they stand on their ability to handle the amount of debt that they already have or even more debt. So again, you monitor the financing process and give them feedback, and you flag and address credit committee issues. So there might be some credit committee issues that come back for the borrower, i.e. the buyer, and you kind of go through that with them and work through it. You track any issues that they might have, and you put together memos on how best to mitigate that. Lastly, we're getting it done. Funds flow coordination, figuring out the wire, figuring out how the funds are going to flow, figuring out where the lender's going to come in, and how the money's going to come from the buyer and the lender to you, and how the buyer and the lender are going to sort their shit out. And then press release and communications from yourself as a firm. This is something we've only just that's been on our radar. And then post-closing relationship re-engagement. So a lot of people don't realize that investment banking is built as a long-term. You are not here to do one transaction with the client and move the fuck on. You are here to do a transaction with the client and help them with subsequent transactions through the lifetime of that business. You're going to help them with this particular transaction, maybe selling their business or doing a portion of the sale. And then at these major institutions, if they did a full sale, then they're going to come to the primary or the major shareholders in that business and say, hey, why don't you join our wealth management arm? And then they'll bring them into the wealth management arm. And then when those guys have interest in buying another business, then great, you're already in our wealth management arm, we're already dealing with your cash. Oh, and great, we have the investment banking arm over here, we're happy to help you do another, this time a buy side transaction. So it really is tracking that business, and then, okay, you bought this business, now we'll help you get financing for that business, or we'll help you get an equity injection into that business. Investment banking is really this kind of circular thing where as the client goes through these various steps of buying, selling, getting equity investment, getting debt financing, looking to restructure the business, all of these various things that exist in the ecosystem of operating a business and the financial side around it. That is what investment banks are for. A lot of people think that they are here for one transaction. I'm here to help you sell your business. I'm here to help you get investment. No. You are there to help them through the lifetime of the business. And that's why that post-closing relationship re-engagement is so important. So that is a very long-winded but very relevant, the deliverables that go into these transactions. I went over kind of the M&A sell side of the transaction. We also have the M&A buy side. We have debt and we have equity. All of those are available to the guys within the capital advisory program. I just didn't want to get too much into it in this one video because I don't have enough time. So that's it for this specific video. If you want to learn how to close $100,000 deals all the way up to $100 million deals, watch this video next. It's right here. It breaks down the entire capital advisory business in full. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.